Today on Rates and Barrels, we discuss a few starting pitchers that have given us some pleasant and unpleasant surprises this season.
Speaking of unpleasant surprises, there were the Josh Naylor shenanigans this weekend on the Tigers-Mariners dust-up. Also unpleasant trying to find a pitcher on the wire right now.
It's tough out there, and we got league shamed. Let's go. Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, June 8th. Derek Van Rive for Eno Saris here with you. Eno, how did the weekend treat you?
Great. We had graduations upon graduations. We had a graduation party. We had family in town. The boys are now middle school and high schoolers, respectively. So,
do you have grand plans for when your children have moved on to post-high school life already?
No, I've already instigated some of my plans, which is I can go to a show and leave them alone at home now. So that's a whole nother level that I'm glad to get to.
Sounds nice.
They know how to make ramen. That was a big step forward.
You got to start with things that don't require fire, and then move up from there. So
microwavable foods, check.
One box checked, one big box checked. That'll carry them a long way, as we all
really
learn.
will, through college at least.
A lot happening on the field over the course of this weekend. Some baseball news you should know as we get started. We saw 5 scoreless in a rehab start from Tarik Skubal over the weekend. I think the early first-line takeaway is nanoscope good, smaller and fewer bone chips also good. Look, the situation might be somewhat unique, but I think the idea of taking an injury that can often sideline a player for several months and shortening up that timeline by as much as half is something that we should generally be excited about. That's progress, right? That's progress through science and medicine in sport to make the game better.
Yeah, I just don't know how much it, tells us about other surgeries like his, because, it does seem unique even among the people who have had the same surgery in the same year. I mean, do we think that Blake Snell is going to have the same quick turnaround, even though he had the same surgery? I feel, I don't know for sure that Schwellenbach and Waldrip and Green used the same nanoscope or whatever, but they did have bone chip surgery, and they seem to be on the old school timeline. They've taken forever. I have shares, yes. But with Skubal, you were never going to drop him, so this is just unqualified good news.
Yeah, I'm excited about it because it's at least an example of things getting a little bit better. Tigers-Mariners, I think, has become a little bit of a rivalry thanks to their meeting in the postseason last year. And I think Josh Naylor has become the biggest enemy of this current Tigers team and probably Tigers fans right now. If you were watching over the weekend, the matinee on Saturday featured a play where Josh Naylor, on his way into home plate, was about to dive and decided to throw. I think can we comfortably say he threw his sliding mitt in the direction of Dillon Dingler as a possible distraction to sort of either make him think that he was sliding in right there, or to maybe take his eye off the incoming throw just slightly. And I don't know. I think I'm generally on board with most of Josh Naylor's antics, but I do think if you are throwing stuff at people on the field while the ball is in play, that's probably not good, and maybe even something we need a rule for, even though I'm not a guy that wants to add rules to everything.
Yeah, if you're looking on YouTube right now, that's the black blur that's headed for the catcher is his sliding glove. He kind of drops it almost in normal running motion, but in a way that you're like, you drop that towards the catcher. And it had shades of, was it A-Rod chopping the glove with trying to look like he was just running to first base, but chopping down on the glove, where you're like, come on, dude. I get it that Josh Naylor's whole thing is to squeeze every inch of competitiveness out of every play, right? He's throwing his hand up when he's on second base, even if he doesn't know what pitch it is, to maybe get in the pitcher's head, or maybe he's, got the signs. I mean, he's squeezing every stolen base out of his mediocre speed as possible. These things, there are good things in here and there are bad things, right? And so I think he ends up being kind of the lovable pirate that ends up being on your team when you like him when he's on your team and you hate him on the other team. That's the best way I can describe it. And I don't think I'm not here to say that it's all bad. Like, it's definitely a level of competitiveness you want on your team generally. But this one play, I think, went a little bit too far. But I don't also, I don't advocate the throwing at him between his shoulder blades, also because that pitch looked like it was headed straight for his head.
Yeah, it was bad. And there was no warning issued on that either.
It was really strange.
Cater Montero, who was pitching at the time when the sliding mitt flip happened, was still in the game when Naylor came back up, and he threw a fastball up and hit him between the shoulder blades. And Naylor kind of laughed it off, but that wasn't great, especially, as you may have seen later on the day on Saturday, Jacob Mizorowski lost control of a cutter and hit Tyler Freeman in the side of the head. Fortunately, it caught helmet, and Freeman seems to be doing okay. But man, when you're throwing up above someone's shoulders, especially, that there's no place for that. Like, I think the Tigers were right to be annoyed by this particular thing that Josh Naylor did. I don't think that's the right way to go about it, and I was very surprised that there wasn't even a warning issued for it.
And we got a little bit of a Fromber moment in all this, like, strangely. Josh Naylor said that he knew it was on purpose when he looked over in the opposing dugout and Fromber was pointing and laughing.
Oh yeah, sometimes these situations play out and you're kind of like, was that really what was happening? But in this instance, I kind of believe everything.
Yeah. It's just, oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, that's why Fromber didn't get the long-term deal he wanted. I guess he keeps telling us who he is, I guess.
He does. Now, I think in terms of other things that happened in the course of this series, we saw a Kevin McGonigal walk-off and a homer over the course of Sunday's game for a rally win for the Tigers. I saw in the recap rundown, there was a fan, a kid that had McGonigal goggles on. They were just like cups, but that was pretty cool. So good moment for her being there on the day where he has a big game and walks it off for a win. But Bryce Miller, I think, was the place I wanted to go here. I mean, 6 scoreless, 1 hit, 9 Ks, 2 walks. Just a really good start. That was in the Saturday matchup, I believe. And it's just one of those things where you look at the overall body of work since he came off the IL, 29 Ks against 5 walks in 27 innings. Everything looks like it's working for him again, and that was just not the case last year, pitching through an arm injury and missing a lot of time. So I'm just curious, are we content to say that Bryce Miller is all the way back? The reason I'm so intrigued is that for teams that drafted him and waited for him to come off the IL, they may feel like they have some found money and a guy they'd be willing to trade, or they may just have an extra pitcher who isn't Bryce Miller that you can go out and get. So there's a lot of different angles here, but what's your overall assessment of how Miller looks now compared to how he looked last year when he clearly wasn't at 100%?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is that he's got his fastball back, not only in terms of velo, but in terms of command. He always had great fastball command, and last year he was just always shaking his head and being like, I don't know where the fastball command is gone. And just goes to my theory that command comes and goes with small little injuries that, he was dealing with last year. I maybe the word small isn't right, but, the injuries that he had last year, I think, contributed to a poor command year. Now you're looking at the location plus on his fastball in every game so far, 130, 125, 127, 115. I mean, it's back. He's got his fastball. In the meantime, he's morphed into a fastball splitter guy, which is kind of interesting because there's been this entire move from the sweeper to the splitter among most of the Seattle pitchers. Who Robbie Ray thought it started with me. He said something along those lines, and I was like, maybe. But their splitters are better, dude. Sorry. But I was also talking to somebody about Logan Gilbert, and with his hands, he's big hands, and just the way that he doesn't really spin the ball actually that well. The splitter seems like a real natural thing. So, Bryce Miller's sweeper always never got swings because he's so over the top, and they could see the release point on that. So the splitter is perfect for him too. I all systems go. I want to point out that interestingly enough, Luis Castillo had a good start last time out too. And I don't know. I don't know what that means other than I think they're going to continue this 6-man rotation. And now we have for Luis Castillo in his last. I'm going to go since he kind of lost his spot in the rotation the first time. He has pitched 17 innings with 4 earned runs, and 18 strikeouts against 7 walks. It's pretty good. I think he's a rosterable pitcher. If he's been dropped in your leagues, I think even in would you go so far as 10s? I definitely in 12s. I'm picking up. I think Luis Castillo is like a top 50 type pitcher, top 60.
I think in 12s he's definitely rosterable. Anything deeper than that, he's definitely in a lot more than he's out of your lineup. And I think, looking at the upcoming schedule, if it holds the way it is right now, and they keep going with the 6 starters, which they should, they've got. They're on today. They're going to have a road game in Baltimore on Monday night, but they have the next 2 Mondays off. I think with that, it's like 1 start per week for these guys. Just get them through this middle third of the season, especially kind of see where things sit after the All-Star break. And then if you have a completely healthy group, maybe you make an adjustment then. Sometimes something happens and you just move on accordingly. At Washington, home versus the Red Sox, at Cleveland, and home versus the Jays are the next 4 starts for Luis Castillo. I think I'm in on 3 out of the 4, maybe all 4. The Red Sox right now, especially if you catch them at home in Seattle, are you really that worried about Boston?
In Seattle, not so much, and just generally not so much right now, at least not in terms of power. Yeah, and then, I made a trade. I made a couple trades in AL Labor. I have already traded away Ryan Weathers and Griffin Jacks for Aroldis Chapman. I had so much starting pitching in AL Labor that I've done all these trades. So I did that trade, and I don't regret it at all, even though Weathers has been great. Then this weekend, I traded Zebby Matthews and Mick Abel for Addison Barger. And I traded Reid Detmers for Andres Munoz. So those are deep leagues. But on the table in all of these deals was Emerson Hancock. And there were some people who expressed interest and some people who didn't. And one of the things that I find interesting that may play itself out and lead towards a 5-man rotation is that Emerson Hancock has lost the first start, he had 8 inches of vert on his, according to Fangraphs. It's weird notation. Let's just say it this way. Relative to his first start, he's lost more than 3 inches of vertical break. Relative to his next 3 starts, he's lost about 2 inches of vertical break. No matter what, Emerson Hancock has lost a lot of vertical break on his 4-seam. And that was part of what made him better this year. So I wonder if there's any regression happening where, it was a great start. He has made some real changes that should lead to him being a good starting pitcher. But are we sure that he's not more 4 or 5 that's pitching to like a 2 right now? And if he becomes more like a 5, if there is regression, are they like, well, we do have an option for him, and we do have Luis Castillo as the veteran, so we'll let him go back down and see if he can find those inches of vert on his 4-seam again. That's just one of the possible outcomes. So you have to think about that whenever you're valuing Emerson Hancock going forward.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think with Emerson Hancock, if he is a number 4 starter, that's still a pretty big step up from where he appeared to be this time last year. You're still doing well as an organization if that's the outcome for him. It's just disappointing from a fantasy perspective if you keep riding the wave too long, and then the wheels sort of fall off, and you kind of give back some of the ratios you may have banked up to this point.
No, and I think this like leads to another interesting text we got from a friend this weekend, which is just that, from our real life baseball angle, oh my God, Emerson Hancock, what a great win for coaching in Seattle. What a great outcome for him. I mean, it does call back to the fact that he was a high pick, but then there was all this, the stuff is really not there. And I don't even know if he's a starter. So for that to come back around and him to be at least a 4 in our estimation is amazing. And that's great. And then to be well, in 10 teams, you may want to trade Emerson Hancock.
Well, look, there's a few different realities that we live in as far as how we like to play fantasy baseball. So yes, we did get league shamed via text over the weekend. And it was a complimentary league shaming, I would say, because it started like this. Eno, you are the best, but please stop making so many pitcher streamers. If you're in a league that you can bench starters all the time and go with other guys, you are in a silly league. Major league teams don't have the luxury of benching starters all the time. No? So, I get it. I get the sentiment, right? And I think, play the type of league that you want to play in. We play in a lot of different types of leagues. We play in some shallow leagues where there are useful starting pitchers and useful nearly everything's available on the wire. And that's just the way that league's built because that's how many people want to play that format. You start getting into the other end, 20-team keeper leagues like Devil's Rejects and 12-team mono leagues like you mentioned AL Labor. I play in an AL keeper league that's very deep like that. And the waiver wire is incredibly thin. So, I mean, you were just talking about all the trades you made because you built a really good roster, but even a 12-team mono league, double it up, right? That's a 24-team mixed league. That's still 6 teams smaller than what Major League Baseball is. Yeah. If you really wanted to try and play a 30-team league, I think you would need some smaller guardrails on roster construction limits just to keep teams from completely hoarding anyone with a pulse on the pitching side.
Well, also, you'd have to penalize them like major league teams get penalized for holding guys. They have to get more expensive somehow. You can't just have a keep forever 30-team league because some team might amass Shohei and Julio Rodriguez, and you know what I mean, and all of a sudden have 6 stars that would never be on the same team together, and the other 29 teams are so you just get to keep those guys for 6 years, So I think that's something you have to do in 30-team leagues for sure. But it is hard for us to provide analysis for all these different leagues, right? And try to find the middle. So, for our good friend, we were maybe a little shallow at times, but we have asked you what types of leagues you play in. And most of the time we hear that you play sort of 12s, maybe 15s is the second most, and so, in those leagues, where's the line for you? Because Reid Detmers is really interesting. I've Reid Detmers 60 in my last rankings, right? And I think he's a pitcher. If you were in a 30-team league, obviously you're pitching every time out. In Labor, what was interesting was I have Troy Melton and Dylan Cease and some guys coming back, and I ended up wanting to trade Detmers because in that league I have to play him every time, and I just felt like Detmers is the guy that can just blow up. He could just give you a good 8 earned runs on a day, and you're just like, gah, and you might have avoided that if you had the option. But in those, like he says, those deeper leagues where you have to start the guy every time, it becomes even more important that you can start him every time out because you can't stream in a 12-team AL only. But so Detmers at 60. So my idea is that I think basically the top 50, I feel are not. You're just set and forget. And somewhere between 50 and 60, I start going, ooh, do I want to pitch Michael Soroka in LA? Do I want to pitch, Mackenzie Gore in Yankee Stadium? Like there's certain things where you're like, in the 50s and 60s is where I start to lose I want to start this guy every time. So that means there's only 50 starting pitchers in my estimation that I would want to start every time out. So that's where fantasy is so different from the big leagues, because 50 is 1.5 starters per team.
I think it would also, imagining the deeper the league, the more weight's going to be placed on draft day and what you have going in, because there are so few options on the waiver wire. Like what you already have is mostly how the season's going to go. I think it would be a less fun overall experience for most people to have to like sit back. It almost turns it into a draft and hold situation. You're just you're
the
at the
waiver
mercy
wire.
Of everything you did, like for prep and everything you did leading into the season. I think you need a little bit of cushion to make the gameplay experience, I think, approachable for most people.
The waiver wire in 12-team AL only is just awful. It's not even really fun. I go in and I sort by last 7 days, innings pitched and plate appearances. That's all I do. And I go and find somebody that's playing. That's it. My pickup this week in the AL only league, Anthony Banda. Yeah. Dropping Ryan Zefferjon. That's too deep. That's too deep. It's nice that Anthony Banda is throwing harder, by the way. If you want, check out his Stuff Plus and his Velo recently. But he is also like the 4th option in the worst bullpen in the big leagues. Yay!
Right. All right. I'm going to try to bring this back. So you're asking a question
bring this
about
back to relevance.
you're asking a question about Reid Detmers. I think Detmers is probably in that top 50 pretty firmly now. We've seen the K rate hold up with the move back into the rotation. I think what he's doing right now looks like a version of what he did in 2022. He put up a 3.77 ERA and a 1.21 WHIP that year. The walk rate's a little bit better. The strikeout rate's a lot better. I think with those two things being where they are, that's a good profile. And the only real question I have is, do we trust him to keep the ball in the park consistently? Because when it goes really bad, when he has those blowups you're talking about, historically it's been major issues keeping the ball in the park. But generally, I think Detmers is firmly inside that top 50. And then pulling it back to Bryce Miller for a second, part of the reason why the person that has him might be willing to trade him is because of the nature of the injury last year. We started the show talking about the bone chip that was removed from Tarik Skubal's arm. They did not remove the bone spur that
That's right.
Bryce Miller has in his arm. They went with a Synvisic injection. This is from Dr. Keith Meister. It's a thing that they did to improve joint lubrication and dampen inflammation and relieve pain. So I just wonder, it's in there, it's still floating around in there. How long until it becomes a problem again? Clearly, it's less of an issue, because even Miller himself in the MLB.com story said, after I got that, referring to the ejection, that's when I started feeling better. I thought for sure I was going to have to get the spurs shaved down and removed. So this, to me, sounds more like would need traditional surgery to remove those spurs, like the nano procedure probably wouldn't even be on the table for someone like Bryce Miller. So you have this sort of lingering, elevated, big injury concern, even though everything looks so good right now.
Yeah, it does seem like the other shoe waiting to drop on some level. Might be easier to get him in a keeper league, maybe in a redraft league, someone saying, well, he's healthy now and I'll just take what I can get,
Yeah, he's healthy now, and now is all that matters. And look, hopefully it's a non-issue, and I don't know, maybe sometimes Spurs just move into a spot where they are permanently not a problem for pitching. I hope that's the case for someone like Bryce Miller. We're going to hit a quick break. When we come back, we got some more pitching that stood out to us. Mostly good, some bad, over the course of the weekend. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. Michael Soroka, a 3.28 ERA, a 1.15 WHIP, 72 Ks and 74 innings. What year is it, sir?
Apparently, I talked to him about this. Apparently, it's 2017.
Might be all right.
Yes, he told me that in 2017 and 2016 he threw a slurvy breaking ball from a lower arm slot and was having success in the minor leagues, but due to perhaps wanting to chase Reid on his four seam and add more of a four seam because he was a sinker slurve guy then, he kept creeping upwards with his arm angle. We had this long conversation about how much he's changed since those days. And even if you just use 2020 as a starting point and you look at this movement chart, you can see in 2020 he had a 37-degree arm angle and he was throwing a four-seamer and a gyro slider and a lot of sinkers. Fast forward to this year, he's a 27-degree arm angle. He's mostly four-seam. The gyro slider's gone. It's replaced by a slurve. He says that's the same pitch, just kind of mechanically done a little differently. He's added a cutter. He also went from a four-seam changeup to a two-seam changeup, and you can see how he added, 8 inches of drop basically on that changeup. So this is, I think, the best pitch plot he's ever had. It's the healthiest arm slot. He said that going upstairs on the trying to get that ride and going upstairs in the arm slot, he think that it led to the Achilles injuries, because he said that basically he was out of whack and the Achilles just happened to be the joint that took all the stress. And he feels like he's in a better place now. We talked about calf lifts. If you're having Achilles pains, he thinks calf lifts are the way. He said just make everything stronger around it, basically. And I don't know, for runners, I thought that was interesting. But he also said this is the better arm slot for him. This is the best kind of pitch plot where he's got something in every quadrant. He's got pitches for lefties, pitches for righties. The slurve is decently platoon friendly in terms of getting lefties and righties out. So he's in a good spot. None of his pitches rates as above 100 on Stuff Plus, but I think that's fine. He's like an average pitcher. I think he's like a slightly above average pitcher. Like he has more pitches than average. The pitches themselves are average. That adds up to being slightly above average. So I don't know that I believe these current stats just as they are on the paper, but I do believe he's a good pitcher. I think he's actually pretty firmly on the line between a guy you want to start every time and a guy you don't. Like, I don't want to throw Mike Soroka against the Dodgers.
Right, but you're looking at him probably in a similar light to Detmers, and the difference would be you trust Detmers to get more strikeouts. But I would guess that you have a little more confidence in the floor ratios that Soroka is going to give you. And then the question, I think it's just been, major injuries and trying to get back from that and bouncing around to it a few different teams. And I think Soroka would be a pretty easy player to go trade for if you're looking for pitching. Relative to what he's going to contribute, I think he can probably do pretty well going out and getting him. Best projection you see of the public-facing ones at Fangraphs would be from Zips. That's a 3.72 ERA, 121 WHIP. That's almost identical to his career numbers as he approaches 500 innings in the big leagues. So I think that's actually pretty plausible. I think most of the projections might be a little bit too pessimistic on Soroka. The main concern I would have is for a guy that's been hurt so often, even though we saw 174 and 2/3 from him with Atlanta all the way back in 2019. It's been a long time since he's made it start to finish through a full season healthy. Fatigue would be the thing I'd be worried about over the course of the second half. Even if he's able to avoid the IL, just wonder if that's something where maybe the stuff isn't quite as crisp or the command starts to slip a little bit, if that's what ultimately pulls him back closer to that 4 ERA.
Yeah, I think, maybe some homers too, as we get into the summer months here, we're heading into the homer months. He's had some issues with homers himself, and maybe the drag on the ball is changing. There was another part of the conversation with Soroka that was interesting for anybody who's trying to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on in player development and what's going on in pitching coaching, because he's been to a couple of different places. Atlanta was fairly aggressive with changes with him. They may not have worked for him, but I think that's interesting that they were like, yeah, move the arm slot up, do this. There was a lot of changes they were trying to effect on him. Somebody who'd had success in the minor leagues, they weren't complacent. They kept trying to make him better. So it didn't work out, but I would call that sort of a wash in terms of they're doing some things interesting there with him. He said in the interview that he went backwards in Chicago with the White Sox in 2024. That's a direct quote. He went backwards, and that he kind of like made a lot of strides on his own, not listening to the coaches that he had there in the bullpen. And then he really wanted to credit Tyler Zombro and the Cubs when he went to Chicago with the idea for the cutter and also changing the changeup from 4-seam to 2-seam. So just interesting because he was on some teams that we sometimes debate. Where do the Cubs stand when it comes to pitching development? Where do the White Sox stand? How excited should we be about prospects that come through there? The Cubs obviously have some things that they've found, like the cut ride. I'm looking at somebody like Edward Cabrera, though, and he did lose a tick of velo. There's been some some pitching mix changes that I think have contributed to the stuff going down a little bit. But all in all, I don't know that the Cubs have performed a good transformation on Edward Cabrera. He's maintained his command, which we like, but what do you think about this strikeout rate? Maybe it should be a little bit higher, but maybe it's not going to be a positive strikeout rate this year. He's headed into Coors for his next start. You'd never start him for that one. But where is Edward Cabrera on your rankings, Derek Van Riper?
Probably lower than yours, only because I've been a general skeptic of Cabrera for all the health concern reasons, and mostly because 2025, we still had double-digit walk rates every single year. I guess the good news is, with the move to Chicago, he's maintained the improvements we saw a year ago. 8.5% walk rate this year, 8.3% last year. Even as a relative ECAB skeptic, I think he's really important to the Cubs, given all the injuries they've piled up. I think there's enough there where I expect things to start heading in the right direction. Oopsie is spitting out a 3.92 ERA and a 1.27 whip for the rest of the season. I don't think you have to pay that kind of price via trade to get Cabrera right now. I think with Shota Imanaga and the overall like weather changes like in Wrigley Field, home run season, as you said before, like people might be a little bit skeptical of the home run rate coming back down for Cabrera, but I don't think what we've seen so far is his true talent level. So I think there's some better days ahead for Edward Cabrera here.
Yeah, I think he's uncomfortably close to droppable in 10 and 12s.
Well, shallow leagues, yeah. Like that's the key, is the context. But I don't know. We're going to talk about where the money went this weekend. There's very little out there for pitching right now.
If you're in 15 teams, I guess you're happy to have Edward Cabrera even on your bench because, the names don't get better. You're right.
Yeah, shuffling them around in a 10 or a 12, that's actually doable. It's just a matter of if someone else gives you someone that you like better on the waiver wire, or if someone else actually emerges from the minors. I mean, like, are you taking in a shallow league, if you're in a 10-team league and you were stashing Cabrera on the IL, and he's back, and you're looking at the numbers, are you dropping him to pick up a Gage Jump in a shallow league, knowing that Jump has to deal with West Sacramento?
Yeah, I think I have. And one little interesting thing about Jump, too, is that has 3 inches more vert on his fastball in the major leagues than he did in the minor leagues. And I'm not really sure why that is. I think it could have to do with elevation. He was in a league that has a lot of elevated parks. So you look at his 4-seam stuff plus now at 104, it's better than it was in the minor leagues, and it portends better success for him. I do think more strikeouts are coming for Jump. It's better fastball, better stuff plus, not as great command, actually, weirdly, but also not a great big history of terrible command like Edward Cabrera. So I think I would make the jump. And interesting enough, the Oopsie projection is almost identical. 3.92 ERA, 1.27 whip. There you go. Better strikeout rate, says Oopsie, though.
All right. So kind of keeping it in a similar corner of the player pool, I would say Spencer Strider in shallow leagues might be the last pitcher on a roster for someone right now, with expectations that he can be more. It's as I put in the rundown, I'm calling it a kombucha girl season so far for Spencer Strider. because it's the meme with the girl that takes the kombucha and she looks like she likes it and she looks like she hates it and she's still thinking about it.
That's kombucha? I never knew what she was trying.
She's trying kombucha for the first time. That's why she makes all of those faces. And if you've had kombucha, you're kind of like, yeah, I understand the idea of making all those
I know
faces.
What you're talking about. Yeah.
I don't know what you thought I was implying, but I'm glad I was able to deliver some context.
I just never knew
meme.
what that meme that girl was trying in the memes. That's funny. No, I think with Strider, the 29% strikeout rate trumps a lot of the mediocre other numbers. I'm interested.
So are we saying it's rust for the walk rate being at 12.8%? I mean, like if it's a 4 ERA, which is fine for now. It's only 36 innings. He was hurt to start the year. 128 whip, probably close to average right now. Swinging strike rates is there behind the strikeout rate. So it's like, okay, is this just still knocking off some rust, getting used to the arsenal? What do you attribute the walk and home run rate upticks to?
He's just not as good as he used to be.
So he's figuring out how to pitch with lesser stuff. I mean, nothing in the arsenal grades out as above average right now, and he's got a four-seamer, a curveball, a slider, and a changeup.
Yeah, but he's throwing the curveball and the changeup 26% of the time, which is a lot more than usual. I think that leads to the lower location plus numbers and the walk rate numbers, as he's trying to be a bigger arsenal guy because he's not as dominant with his front two offerings. But it's not terrible. The 29% strikeout is good. So I'm going to anchor myself to that strikeout rate in this situation. I mean, he overperformed his stuff plus in terms of strikeout rate even last year. So I think he's uncomfortably close to this group that we're talking about. But I do think that the upside, you have to think that the upside is at least there with Jump, right?
I mean,
maybe Edward Cabrera's upside is the least of the group that we're talking about.
I think if you're letting me choose for the rest of this season between Jump, Cabrera, Strider, and Soroka, I'm still tempted to put Strider first of that bunch by a small margin, but they're all very close.
Yeah.
And these are tough decisions to make. Like, I know you can laugh and say, well, these guys are all good major league starters. They should all be rostered. You should have to use them all, right? You can league shame us into that if you want, but I think any game that makes you make challenging decisions is a good game.
I mean, and I'm just to back to the streamer thing. Like when I get forced into a corner like this, and there's 4 of these options, then I go to the schedule. And if I'm allowed to pick guys up and drop guys, then I'm going to go to the schedule and say, well, Edward Cabrera gets Colorado next week, so I'm dropping him and picking up Strider, or I'm picking up Jump, and then I'll see what happens next week. Although Jump right now, he's in Vegas this week.
Yeah, they're playing 2 series in Vegas this week,
which is not good for. That's elevation. He's going to go back to his old, IVB on the fastball, and he may give up homers. Like, whatever the schedule games suggest, I'm going to go in that direction. And if the schedule is equally bad for all of them, then I might just go with Strider because there's some peaks there that are really interesting.
Good news is Vegas. I know people love when we talk about elevation. Vegas is about 2,000 feet. El Paso, which is in the PCL, just under 4,000. Albuquerque, as we've talked about before, over 5,000. So that's where the problems come in, right? It's the PCL in general is loaded up with places like that. But I do not like the A's playing 2 series this week in Las Vegas. I'm not happy about that. Guess they can do whatever they want. Emmet Sheehan stays on the roller coaster. If you look at the last 30 days, 4.56 ERA, not good. 101 whip, yay! Early exit against the Angels on Sunday afternoon, and I just think on the surface right now, he looks like a young pitcher with a home run problem. Not the first, won't be the last. If you fix that, everything looks pretty good, and more specifically, the issue seems to be lefties this year. Lefties are slugging .496 against him so far in 2026. For his career, it's only a .417. He hasn't shown us as much of a split in the past. So what are you doing with Emmet Sheehan right now?
Yeah, it is. Interesting. There are a couple things going on. Like the velocity has been the long term story where he couldn't keep it above 94 deep into the games. Now he's comfortably above 94 in most starts, but there is still a big oscillation from game to game. I mean, on the 1st of June, he averaged 95.9 against Arizona, and then in that game that he struggled, you're talking about on the 7th on Sunday, he averaged 94.7. So there's a pretty big difference there in terms of fastball. It's a tick plus in difference. And then the changeup is supposed to be his best pitch. That's had a difference of as much as 3 inches of vertical break from one start to the next. And in terms of stuff plus, the changeup has been as bad as a 94 and as good as a 123. So there's just this oscillating. Something's going on with the changeup. And in this start that he struggled, he didn't even throw the changeup 10% of the time. That's a pitch he's thrown as much as 35% of the time. So there's something where he's trying to figure out who he is. I think he's a pronator. So I would say throw the changeup more, throw some right on right changeups, lean into that changeup. That would be my way forward for him just personally if I was his pitching coach. Generally a 26-year-old who is healthy and putting up good strikeout minus walk rates, good Sierra. I would buy. I think this is a good time to buy. I think that some of this is home run noise. What we know is that home runs provide a ton of noise for pitchers in short samples. He's got a 1.7 home runs per night right now. Sheehan does right now in this year for his career. It's in the major leagues is 135. His projection from Oopsie is 135. So that right there is where the poor luck is. If you want to reference the big L word.
Should continue to get plenty of chances. I mean, they're using Eric Lauer as one of their 6 starters right now. We saw Tyler Glasnow get shifted to the 60-day IL recently. Snell, as you mentioned earlier in the show, still down with surgery for the bone chips. So I think there's plenty of time for Sheehan to right the ship and keep that spot and avoid getting bumped out of the rotation anytime soon. Next start comes Sunday at the White Sox, which is becoming an increasingly loaded matchup for me. Like they're not wilting the way that I thought they would coming off that fast start.
Yeah. They were a difficult one when I looked at actual results versus projected results. Projected results suggest that they should be someone you target, and actual results say they should be someone you avoid. So do with that what you will when it comes to the White Sox. For Sheehan, one thing I want to point out, he has a single projection, the Oopsie projection of a 3.7 ERA with a 1.15 whip and a 27% strikeout rate. That is the best single projection on any of the pages of the players that we just put in a box together.
Yeah, there you go. So if you're thinking about trades, thinking about the future, maybe Emmet Sheehan kind of stands out as the best of the bunch that we've talked about in this segment. Non-Bryce Miller division, but maybe less injury concern than Bryce Miller too, given the context. We're going to hit a quick break. When we come back, Eno mentioned something about the noise caused by home run rates in small sample sizes. I think there might be something happening with the ABS strike zone and relievers that's really tricking people right now. We'll break it down when we come back. Welcome back to Rates and Barrels. Obviously, this has not been the year people were expecting from Jeff Hoffman. And I think it started last year with Jeff Hoffman, right? We saw some of the warts late in the year. Home run rate soared to 1.99 homers per 9. This season, he's chugging along with the best Sierra of his career. Unless you play in a Sierra league, that's probably not helping you. It's a 2.11 Sierra against a 6.26 ERA and 1.68 whip. So Jeff Hoffman has 47 Ks, still having some trouble with the long ball. I think what we're having with some of these closers especially, Andres Munoz is the real inspiration for this segment, and it's interesting that you traded for him in AL Labor. I think what we're seeing is home run rates that are up in a limited sample for relievers in particular, skewing ratios to the point where we just think something's really wrong when nothing really appears to be wrong. I can't find a problem with Andres Munoz. other than the homers. And I don't know if we should be like quickly downgrading pitchers struggling with homers right now, given the changes to the strike zone. I would imagine that as we continue kind of seeing what year one of the ABS strike zone brings, we're going to realize that relievers might be impacted even more than starters because they have shallower arsenals in most cases. They have fewer pitches to throw. And I think their dependence on high fastballs might be even greater than starters' dependence on high fastballs in a lot of cases. So I just think with relievers in particular, if I see particularly bad ratios, but I see underlying skills that look good, easier to say it about Munoz because it's only been this year. Even in the case of Jeff Hoffman, I'm still kind of optimistic that better days are ahead once they adjust.
Yeah, I'm looking at, who throws high in the zone, and as a percentage of all their pitches and, seeing if there's something there for relievers that are struggling. Relievers can have more extreme splits because they're only in there for one inning. So, yeah, and they're a matchup situation where you can choose the matchup. So if you can choose the matchup, then you might have a guy who throws 80, 90% of their pitches high in the zone. As is the case with the cutoffs that I used, Jeremiah Estrada's 53% in the top third of the zone is the highest. And of course, that makes sense. He has this high riding four seam that he loves to use at the top of the zone. Daniel Palencia is at the top of this list as well. We've got Paul Sewald, Cade Smith throwing at top of the zone a lot. The reason I bring this up is just because the top of the zone has changed the most with regards to last year with ABS. Mason Miller, though, up here, Aroldis Chapman. So I don't see this as a group of pitchers that is uniformly struggling. They're still able to pitch at the top of the zone. They're still having success. On the other hand, maybe my idea that the smaller strike zone puts more emphasis on stuff plus was incorrect, because when I look at last year's worst location plus relievers, I start to see some people that are really struggling this year. So Seranthony Dominguez, number one. I see Ryan Zefferjon on this list this is the worst location plus last year, thinking about how that predicts this year. Gregory Soto has been struggling recently, but again, Mason Miller is on this list, but Andres Munoz is in the bottom 20 when it comes to location plus last year. Jordan Leisure, and a bunch of people that are not in the league right now, to be honest. So, there's something about location plus that's still valuable. And, maybe with the smaller zone, if you really just can't find the zone, that could tell you some of the struggles that Andres Munoz is having. It's a smaller strike zone, and he's having a harder time being in it. If you just look at something as easy as zone percentage for Munoz, it's the worst of his last 5 years, and it's down from 47% last year to 40% this year. So maybe a smaller zone does put pressure on command and does make it harder for guys with terrible command to even make it in the zone.
Yeah, that would be kind of my initial thought. And even like we mentioned Abner Uribe, I think on Friday, just talking about the Brewers bullpen, Trevor McGill kind of taking over that ninth inning role. Lowest zone percentage in 3 years for Abner Uribe, 47.1% compared to 53% last year. Not a guy known for his command, even though he's improved a little bit over time in that regard. So I do think the more questionable location plus relievers might be struggling a little bit, having to make some adjustments. And maybe it takes more than this season. Maybe it takes until the offseason for them to really realize, oh, wait a minute, I got crushed all season. Like I never bounced back. I didn't take the ERA from the 4 or 5 range down to the 2 range. It didn't happen. The correction never set in. Maybe that's adding another pitch. Maybe that's working on command. And I don't know. We talk a lot about stuff and pitch development, but we don't talk a lot about how guys get better with command, or how they could possibly get better with command over the entire span of an offseason.
It's a little bit like stuff plus in that changing your pitch mix is probably the easiest way to affect command. You figuring out some pitch that you command worse than others. For somebody like a Munoz, he's at times commanded the sinker better than the four seam. If he figures that out, then maybe he kind of changes that mix a little bit. Then there's also just missed patterns, changing where you are on the mound to miss in better places. Sometimes a single target can be a big deal. Sometimes it can be a change in mindset. For Aroldis Chapman, he famously said, I started thinking about command for the first time. I think what he meant was I started going away from a single target and more towards I can maybe hit up and away or up and in, and think about this in more quadrants than I thought of before. Maybe for Munoz, it's more, nope, I've been trying to be too fine with it. Let me go to a single target and just throw 99 with great stuff towards the middle of the zone, up my zone rate and win that way. On some level though, I'm just going to take the 113 stuff plus from Munoz, the excellent K-BB, 34% strikeout rate, 9% walk rate, the 250 Sierra. Those are all predictive numbers. Even the swinging strike rate's the best in 4 years. I'm going to take all those things and say Andres Munoz is bouncing back.
Let's dig into where the money went this weekend. Trading for a closer that's struggling is certainly better than trying to chase them on the waiver wire in most leagues. Let's start on the hitting side, though, today. Lars Nootbar was a pretty aggressive ad for me in a few different leagues. In one league because I made a pretty big mistake a month ago. I didn't realize I made the mistake at the time. Usually you don't. Colton Cowser was someone that I cut, and it was a 15-team mixed league. Things weren't going well. K rate was bad. Power hadn't shown up yet. And I think since the day I cut him, about 4 weeks ago, he's been hitter number 35 in the Fangraphs player rater. He's hitting .339 with 6 homers, 17 RBIs, 12 runs, and a stolen base during that span. So he's been getting scooped up in some of the more shallow leagues where he hadn't been added previously. But Nootbar became important to me this weekend because I think he's a do-everything outfielder in a lineup that at least 1 through 5, 1 through 6 is here to be a pain in the arse for the rest of the National League all season long.
Yeah, Nootbar didn't play against the lefty. It is possible that he doesn't play against lefties. He has been platoon in the past, but there's something about his high walk approach that I think would always at least lead to an interesting OBP against lefties. And so there's still the potential that he plays every day. Coming off of double heel surgery for Nootbar, I don't know where the stolen base projection should lie. I think it might be 2, 3, 4 stolen bases the rest of the season, unless he's fixed what's ailing him and he takes off. He hasn't tried yet. I do know that he's a big bat speed guy in terms of the work he's done in the cage and the training he's done. So it's interesting to see, even though it's a very small sample, that he's swinging the bat really, really hard. So maybe the power is going to be a little bit better than it's been in the past, and the speed will be worse. But in any case, the floor of kind of like a 250 guy with a great OBP on a decent team, on a surprisingly decent team, should give you good runs and RBI. And, it will be above average power, most likely, to maybe a little bit of better than above average power if this bat speed portends anything. So, I think Nootbar is a really interesting player that deserves to be picked up. If you had to choose between Nootbar and Cowser, it's a little bit interesting for me. Both of them have been platooned. I would say that Cowser's defense is probably better. He's been playing in center field sometimes against lefties. So Cowser for me, I might take Cowser. I might just take Cowser in a keeper situation for sure. One thing I want to show about Cowser is this is the best. Even in a rolling small sample, this is the best he's ever been. You have to go back all the way to his debut to get anything that was close on a rolling level. This is 25 game rolling average we're looking at. His 25 game WOBA right now is over 400. And he only did that when he debuted. Otherwise, he's been below 350, even with his ebbs and flows. So that's an interesting thing. Also, he was hitting way too many grounders to start this season, and he's figured something out there. So there's a real adjustment there where he might be putting together what we know that Colton Cowser has separately, which is a great sense of the zone, great bat speed, great power, probably better defense than Nootbar, probably more speed than Nootbar. What if I made you choose? Who would you choose?
Cowser because of the schedule. So it's a downgrade in the leagues where I dropped Cowser and picked up Nootbar. And again, I made that move to drop Cowser a month or so ago before this recent turnaround. But the big difference here, if you're kind of looking at the overall bodies of work and you think they might be kind of similar in terms of usage, the schedule favors Cowser for these next couple of weeks. The Cardinals will see one lefty per week for the next 4 weeks if the current schedule holds. The Orioles won't see another lefty until Foster Griffin, and that's like 2 weeks from this coming Saturday. So that's almost like the end of June before they're going to see another left-handed starter based on how things currently line up. So it's a close enough thing where playing it week to week probably matters. I think you're right to call out the possibility that Nootbar doesn't run as much coming off the double heel surgery. I think at least with Cowser, we've seen some glimpses in the past that he offers up that ability. He was 14 for 14 as a base stealer last year. That was part of what made him appealing to me. I thought, like, hey, even if he's a low average player, it's power, it's speed, it's defense that matters in center field. I also wonder, maybe he's more comfortable playing in a corner, and that's actually working out. Playing him alongside Leody Taveras, like somehow maybe that's just helped him settle in a little bit more and focus a little bit more on his bat and worry a little bit less about his glove.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's just a young man sort of putting the pieces together. You've seen different approaches, one that was a little bit more aggressive to get to the power, one that was, a little bit more passive to maybe cut the strikeouts. And he got caught maybe in between some of those different things. And if he can get back to the fly ball rates that he was putting up in 2024 with the current strikeout rate and current walk rate, that could be the best version of himself at the plate.
The only thing that has me thinking twice about Cowser, though, is that he's gone off like in this recent stretch with a bunch of days out of the lineup mixed in. Like it's almost like the optimal usage. Like, they had a lot of lefties. Like the schedule opens up.
He sat against a righty though too. But yeah, I think I'm just hoping that was like they had 4 lefties in 1 week 2 weeks ago, and like I'm just hoping that was just a weird week.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on here. But part of why he went off is just like the optimal usage of a platoon guy sometimes lends itself to everything clicking for a stretch. Nevertheless, I regret cutting Colton Cowser.
I think ideally in these 15-team leagues, you want 2 Cowsers and 2 Nootbars. Like you want 2 of these guys who sit against lefties, and then you want on your bench somebody like a Troy Johnson or Tyler Freeman or some of these more streamable outfielders that you can kind of you say, oh gosh, he's got 2 lefties this weekend. I need to put in this other guy. That's how I manage my bench. I try to manage my bench in the 15-teamers is, basically have like 4 outfielders for 2 spots in utility, That's
what I did. The league where I cut him, Evan Carter is on that team, Colt Keith, Brett Beatty.
Yeah, you're filling in based on the schedule.
Now Nootbar's there, Trevor Larnach's on that team.
So there you go.
I kept Evan Carter over Colton Cowser. Oh,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that was an obvious one direction or another at the time, but the results have informed me that I was wrong.
6 homers and 9 stolen bases for Carter. Yay! Don't look at anything else.
No, look at nothing else in that profile. Other places the money went, I was looking at the 12-team RotoWire Online Championship Leagues predominantly. We saw Jason Dominguez, Royce Lewis, Francisco Alvarez all pop back up on rosters, and some pretty big bids on Bryce Eldridge, which I was surprised by. And then I remembered the Giants lineup woke up in a big way last week, and Eldridge had a 9-game hitting streak that he carried into Sunday before that finally ended. So it looks like he's maybe settling in a little bit.
Yeah, there's some really good news in the lineup tracker. He has played twice against lefties in the past week, and he's only missed 2 games in the last 2 weeks, both against lefties. So he might still be in the platoon situation, but he is taking that DH job for himself. So he's got a lineup slot. He's kind of slowly moving up from like 8th in the lineup to 6th most recently. So he's getting a few more plate appearances per game. I mean, it's a fraction at this point, but it is meaningful to get closer to the top of the lineup. His strikeout rate is better. We mentioned before that his wrist injury was maybe suppressing his bat speed last year. And so now it's not elite, but it's good. 73.8 this year, 71.5. Last year was bad enough that it really made me sour on him. You might have heard me talk about how willing I would have been to trade Eldridge. He looks better now with a 23% strikeout rate, 73.8 mile per hour bat speed, but I don't know that I believe all these numbers, because the 23% strikeout rate, you have to go back to A-ball to get that low with him. And then I know it's supported right now by a 9.3% swing strike rate, but that is way lower than he ever had before. It is right to point out that he was a two-way player, that maybe that affected how much he could improve at the plate. Maybe he's just a little bit behind, and this is him coming into his own. That's certainly possible. But he still has a 356 batting average on balls in play. He still has an only okay barrel rate to pair with all this. So when I look at projections, they're for, like a 160, 170 ISO, not a great batting average because the strikeout rate will come back up. I'd hate to be wrong about him again, so I'm going to say that I am more upbeat about his future than I was in the past, and I'm prepared to be wrong, but the projections are pretty boring. For like a 230 hitter with, 22 homers in a year and no speed.
That's like Jack Caglione's worst projection. Yeah, actually, the famous original bat, 235, 11 homers in 77 games, 22 homers over a full season, 6 steals. So, I don't know, man.
But those projections will be wrong if Eldridge continues to strike out 23% of the time. But then he might not be the super high homer player. He might be a guy who hits 250 with 20 homers, and that's a little bit better. But I don't see speed. I don't see defensive value if we're talking real life value. So I don't know how wrong I'll be. We'll see. Right now he's trending towards being like a 1-win player.
Well, just give him 30 days. He could make you look really wrong.
Yes, he really could. The next 30 days will be pretty big.
He could change a lot on you really quickly.
Yeah.
I did see Jacob Gonzalez getting picked up in a lot of the main event leagues. I don't know if he's going to crack 12-team leagues yet, but the range on the prices really wasn't bad. Like 1 being the min, 78 was the max bid. Gonzalez, as we talked about leading to the weekend, was a first rounder out of Ole Miss a few years ago and just started getting to a lot more power this year at AAA. I saw him hit a homer against the Phillies over the weekend. K rate's up at 30%, but it's only his first 7 games in the big leagues. The hard hit rate was through the roof compared to last season at AAA this year. That's going to happen when you're hitting home runs. Usually you're hitting those balls pretty hard. I'm just curious if you threw any small bids at Jacob Gonzalez, given what we've seen from this White Sox offense, and maybe given the possibility that they've got something kind of figured out on the hitting side.
Small was the key word. I have been aggressive. I have some Jared Jones. I have no money.
Oh, yeah, you spent it already.
Yeah, I didn't really, not no money, but I did not have a lot of money. So my pickups this week did not include Jacob Gonzalez. I got Brandon Valenzuela for a couple bucks, where I'm still waiting on Cal Raleigh to come back. In another league, I got Jock Peterson, come on down. I paid $11 unopposed out of 1,000. Maybe that was a bad idea, but Jock Peterson is playing well and playing every day, sometimes sitting against lefties, and back to his decent command, pull everything in the air. I'm just trying to hit homers here, take a walker, hit homers here approach that I just needed in a couple places. Happy Yordan Alvarez is an outfielder day. That's what allowed me to pick up Jock Peterson.
Day for me. Got a lot of Yordan this year, so it's going to open up some interesting possibilities. I did see on the closer side, Yoendrys Gomez was kind of like the cheap fallback to, is it Alex Lange? I always thought it was Alex Lang because Lange seems ridiculous, but range is spelled the same way, so it doesn't seem that ridiculous at all when you use some critical thinking skills for just 30 seconds, Derek. I did see Lucas Erceg stumble through a save conversion on Sunday, but Lange had pitched 3 of the last 4. I think it's his job. I'm just wondering how he leapfrogged Daniel Lynch to be the closer in Kansas City.
Reddit is telling us Lang.
See, I think this is Trevor's fault because Trevor showed up one day and like low key, Trevor's really good at sabotaging us once in a while. Like he just gets in our heads somehow.
Anyway, Alex Lang, I don't like the peripherals. I will take Gomez over Lang. I know that Yoendrys Gomez has no command. I know that Alex Lang has better command, but this stuff, it doesn't speak to me for Alex Lang. So I don't know. I think he might just be the closer because there's not great options, but we still like Lynch. And so we still think that Lynch might take that job, right? I mean, it's like a 30% chance that he takes that job, I would say, something like that.
At least. I mean, Lang looks like the kind of guy the A's would use to close, and it doesn't work. It's not a closer profile.
Yeah, I know. Not those. What is it? The not complimentary.
No, not complimentary. No,
it's not. I mean, it's a below average K minus BB. It's a 3.81 Sierra, which is not great. It's a 97 stuff plus for Lang. It's the only thing. I mean, I'm surprised to see a 25% strikeout rate on top of all this, and it is supported by the swinging strike rate. So that's okay, but 25% is not great for closers in terms of strikeout rate.
No, especially when if you can get away with it, it's because your walk rate's great and Lang's is not. So that's my takeaway there. I did see Grant Taylor got a save over the weekend. Ooh, yeah. Like that's a profile that screams elite closer if they just let him do it. And I wonder, as the longer they hang around, the more I wonder if they would possibly shuffle things around a little bit in the 9th inning.
Got no idea what they're doing, dude. I just got no idea. It's so strange, the Taylor thing. 1 to 2 innings. Sometimes. With rest. Never back to back. Well, then one time back to back. He's an opener. He's got saves. He's got holds. I mean, I get it because it is really nice stuff. And so you want him trending towards starting if you think he can do it. But for a team right now that's 34-31, is that what it is? Is it like this chance that they could win the division, that they could compete this year, then they'd rather just have him as a closer because they haven't really been able to figure that out? We couldn't drop Grant Taylor in our main event. We have him. We've been pitching him just because he gives us good ERA and strikeouts, and that save made it be like, well, we can't drop him now. Is he headed towards being the closer? So, I think it's frustrating to own Grant Taylor, and I can't see into the future on this one. I don't know where he's going, but he's a good enough arm where he should probably be owned in most leagues. At least keeper, at least any teams of any depth. I don't know what to do with him in like a 10 or 12. I think maybe pass. I don't know.
Very intrigued though, long term. If they want to make him a closer, he'll be a top tier closer sooner rather than later. I mean, ticks all the boxes that we're looking for from elite options in the 9th. SP darts in 15-team leagues, just to close the book on that. I saw Shane Drowan, Hunter Dobbins, Jake Bennett, who we talked about last week, and even Stephen Kolek was getting picked up in 12. So that's how bad the starting pitching waiver wire was in a lot of leagues.
Kolek had a 2-star week at least. I think if he made me pick any of these guys on talent, I think I might go with Shane Drowan. It's a decent stuff. It's a wide mix. 5 pitches he throws, so far with decent command. The K-BB is all right. The Sierra's all right. Yeah, Drowan's my pick if you're making me pick out of that grab bag.
Right. And everybody in that group has some questions as to how long they're going to stick in that role. I think with, Drowan, it's Logan Henderson and Brandon Woodruff eventually coming off the IL. Brandon Sproat has struggled enough where he could be the first one out. Robert Gasser's in the rotation right now.
Gasser does not look like a choice that they want to make right now. Gasser is they got pushed into pitching Gasser. As soon as they can replace Gasser, they will, I think.
I'm very worried about Gasser pitching in Las Vegas on Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about Sproat. Sproat versus Perkins, though, is at least kind of a fair matchup of guys I'd like, but I'm not sure are good quite yet. Based on what they've done to this point. So watch them go out and combine to give us like 12 scoreless innings in a pitcher's duel. That seems like the way it's likely to go down because it's the opposite of what I would expect. We're going to go on our way out the door. Reminder, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe or follow button so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like, leave a rating, or sound off in the comments. We'll see you next time.